Okay guys, when you receive your bumper, it should include these items. If you have already purchased my fuel tank relocation kit, you already have the rear cross member. That is required to mount this bumper. If you do not have it, you should have ordered that as well with your bumper. If not, go ahead and stop and contact me at keith@imkeith.com. That's Keith at EIMKEITH.com. I'll quickly go through what you should have when you unbox. This is the center section of the bumper. It will have the passenger side and driver's side frame mounts welded to it for shipping purposes. You'll go ahead and break those off because we'll need to do some welding on the back side of those, and then we will re-weld them to the bumper in the correct position. This is the passenger side wing. You know it's the passenger side because it has a large hole for the exhaust here. The driver's side wing, of course. Your hardware will be bagged A through G. We'll get into that in a minute. You'll have two wing mounts. These get welded to the frame inside the wheel wells. You'll have two nut strips to replace the rusty factory ones. You'll have two recovery points, and you'll have a receiver brace. Okay, let's talk about the wing for a moment. This plane of the wing will bolt to the bottom of your frame. These three holes will correspond with factory holes. This is a drain hole, which you will drill later. This is a drain hole. That's a drain slot. This is a notch that I'll have you cut out of your own frame so that you have wrench swing access to tighten up the frame mounts on the center section. These two holes will attach the wing to the wing mount to the side of the frame. And this way you've got 5 points of attachment on the side of your bumper, which is where you're going to do most of your sliding on rocks, I believe. The wing mounts will interface with the wings in this orientation. So this part of the wing mount continues the bottom plane of the frame. The forward hole, depending on which side it's on, will locate on the fourth factory hole in your frame. If you do not already have a factory receiver, the nutsert might be confusing. It will go inside your frame and it'll locate the threaded nuts for these two holes. The forward two holes in the frame do not have a threaded receiver behind them. So the nutsert comes in from the back of the frame through the open frame rail, and with the nuts that you're going to weld to the nutsert provides the threaded receiver for the final two holes. Your receiver brace will be mounted in this orientation. You will provide a 2" by 2" piece of square tubing which will span from this inside face of the passenger side frame bracket to that inside face of the driver's side frame bracket, tying these two together. It'll locate into this notch, which I provided, which will establish its height and depth. This brace will be welded to the face of that 2 by 2 tube and into the crease on the face of the bumper. And that way it ties all of this together as a solid structure. Your receiver then will come from that opening through this notch and onto the top of your 2 by 2 tube. You'll do some minor trimming on the back of the receiver so that it sits down on top of the 2 by 2 tube in such a way that that cross tube becomes the floor of the receiver at this point. Once all this is welded together, you've created a solid structure from the frame rails to the receiver. These slots are for your safety chains, and these holes correspond with that to catch the end of the safety chain hook. Your recovery points will slide in from the front and bolt through these two holes and those two corresponding holes once these are welded into position. Because these are laser cut, The holes themselves are machined. The outside are laser cut to keep the cost down for you guys. You'll need to grind this smooth with a flap disc. Let's briefly run through the hardware that I've included with your bumper. In bag A, there are 4 M12 flange nuts. I've included flange nuts wherever nuts are welded so that the welding heat doesn't distort the threads. These silver nuts are welded to the inside of the frame mounts. Bag B includes 4 M8 flange nuts to be welded to your cross member for future skid plate use. Bag C, these are 4 additional M12 nuts. These are welded to your nut plates. Bag D contains 12 M12 bolts. These will serve as the primary hardware for mounting the bumper to the truck. There will be 4 bolts each on the bottom of the frame, on each frame rail, and 2 bolts each into the frame mounts. Bag E contains 8 M10 nuts. 4 of these will be welded to the wing mounts. However, do not weld them on at this point. There's a critical step for locating these later, so wait until we get to that point before you weld these on. The other 4 will serve to secure the recovery points. Bag F are 10mm bolts for the wing mounts, and bag G are 10mm extended length bolts for the recovery points. All this hardware is 10.9. Okay, prepping the frame mounts. The first thing I would do is prepare these frame mounts by welding the nuts on them. To do that, you're going to need one of the M12 bolts and one of the silver nuts. To speed things up and to act as a spacer, I use an acorn style lug nut, which helps me center this nut in the hole, and also keeps me from threading things in all day. So once you've prepared the inside of this mount for welding and taken the coating off the flanges of these nuts, you would weld these in this position. Because of the access, it will probably be the easiest to do an arc at the bottom and an arc at the top on each of those. In a similar fashion, use the nuts from bag C to build out your nut strips. These nuts must be welded on in this orientation. This is the handle, this is the flat that will go against the frame. The nuts are welded here. Assuming that this surface was prepped first and these coatings were removed from the flange, this would be ready to weld.